Lovely. Okay, everybody. Yeah. So as I explained, my name's Tim Pattinson. So SEN support. Really, I need to explain to you what schools should be doing for you when you've got a child who's got special educational needs or disabilities. So the SEN Code of Practice 2015, which is accessible online if you wanted to look at it. I don't know if people have got copies, but you can certainly find it on the gov.uk website. If you put in SEN Code of Practice, you can access that there, and it's quite useful to have a look and be able to refer back to that sometimes. But it says that all children and young people are entitled to an education that enables them to make progress so that they will achieve their best, become confident individuals, living fulfilling lives and making a successful transition into adulthood, whether that be employment, further education or training. So it says that schools, mainstream schools, should use their best endeavours to make sure that a child or young person with SEN gets the support they need, and that by doing so, everything that they can meet their special educational needs. They should ensure that children and young people engage in the activities alongside other pupils, their peers who do not have SEN. And it also states that every school should have a SENCO, a Special Educational Needs Coordinator. Now, you may have come across them in your school, your child's school, or you may not have done, but certainly they are the people with the knowledge of what the school should be providing for your child. Now, every school should have what they call a special educational needs information report. Now, you'd find this by looking on the school's website. It's quite often difficult to find. You may have to do a little bit of digging, and if you can use the Hampshire local offer on the web page there, and usually you can put in the name of the school. If you go into I think it's education and childcare, you can click on that, and then you can look on the website. It usually takes you to the website for the each individual school, but as I said, they're quite difficult to find. But every school should have its own information report, which would explain to you exactly what that school offers to children with special educational needs and disabilities. It's quite an interesting read because the schools quite often keep these things hidden. Okay. This is just a little bit of information about what high quality inclusive teaching should look like within a school. So all staff should have high expectations of all children and young people. And this is shown in their teaching and the learning. All adults believe that children and young people should be able to meet or exceed the standard if support is provided for their needs, and that staff should have a good understanding of the whole child or young person, and that all their learning is well planned, relevant and meaningful. Now, we know that this isn't always the case, and we hear from a lot of parents through our phone lines and online through the contact with us that are unhappy with what schools are providing. These are just a few more areas. So you might expect your child to have a time when the teacher does some, or the support staff do some pre-teaching with them, so that they start from a point where they can learn in the main lessons rather than always having to catch up afterwards. Okay. I think we can share these slides with you all afterwards, so that would be something that you could look at afterwards. Okay. So I don't know if people have come across this, the SEND pathway. So every child with special educational needs should be given SEN support in school. So that means help that is additional or different from the support generally given to most other children of the same age. So where you may have identified with the teachers, or they may have identified with you, that your child has some needs that need extra support, SEN, they should be on SEN support. So the purpose of SEN support is to help children and young people achieve the outcomes or learning objectives set for them by the school, along with yourselves and the pupils themselves as well. We know that not all children have the same needs, so it's not like a case of one size fits all, but so every program should be individual to your own child. Now, who decides whether your child receives SEN support? So the SEN Code of Practice says that class and subject teachers, supported by the senior leadership team, should make regular assessments of progress for all pupils. So these should seek to identify pupils making less than expected progress given their age and individual circumstances. So taking all that into account, as long as the school are doing what they should be doing, they should be assessing your children along the way. And if they're not meeting the expected level, then they should be talking to you about what needs to be put in place and what help they're going to offer. If you do have concerns and they haven't come forward, then the best person to try and speak to is either the class teacher or the special needs coordinator, the SENCO in the school. Now, the schools have available to them a booklet, which I can't find because it's hiding on one of my screens. I'm hoping I'm not going to, there it is. So I can't show you this at the moment because I think I'd lose my slides, but every school has available to them something called the SEN Support Guidance for Schools, which is published by the it's HIAS, it's the Hampshire Improvement and something else. I can't remember. I'll have to check that out for you, but it's available.
I've got it, Tim. I'll pop it in the chat.
Lovely, thank you. It's the SEN Support Guidance for Schools, and it's available on the Hampshire County Council's website. So if you were to put in the SEN pathway, then you would get to a page that would link to this booklet, and it's what every school has that explains to the school through the teachers, the heads, the governors. It explains what a school should be looking for or looking at in working with our children who have who are SEN support. And this graduated approach is part of that. So the graduated approach is based on these 4 areas of assess, plan, do, review. So assessing, I think we might be talking about looking at that next. Oops. Yeah, so assess. So the teaching staff should work with the special needs coordinator to assess what your child needs, so that it gives them the right support. This booklet, when you look through it, it divides into all the areas, the 4 main categories of special educational needs, which are cognition and learning, communication and interaction, physical and sensory, and social, emotional, mental health, and it gives ideas and direction to the schools as to what they should be putting in place. Okay, so we've got assess, is look at where the child is at, what are they unable to do, what needs to change. Next one is to plan, to look at what they need to do, and to agree outcomes. And these outcomes should be discussed with yourself. They're not something that the school do without you being involved. Your child is at the centre, but you're part of a team working with the schools. And I know this isn't the experience that you all get. Schools often come across as they know best, and you don't feel that they listen to you, but actually they should be working in partnership with you. So any outcomes that are sought should have been discussed with you and agreed with you, with a timeline of when it's going to be reviewed. So assess, plan, and then the doing is the next really important bit, which is when they put whatever strategies or plans in place. And then the last bit, of course, is to review it. And it's a cyclical process. So if something has been tried and it doesn't work, excuse me, then the next stage is to review it, and then perhaps to try something different or make a few changes. But again, you and your child should be involved in the planning all the way along. It shouldn't be something that the school do just on their own. And part of that reviewing might be thinking about who else can they bring in to help your child. We heard the other day that the educational psychology team have recently been recruiting for more educational psychologists. So there's the hope that there'll be more access to that kind of support going on in the future. So what I would suggest from this is that you do take a look at the SEN information report that your school has. If you've got concerns about, I'm not really sure what school should be doing for my child, then take a look at their SEN report. Usually I go into, when you go onto the school's website, usually find an area for parents. It might be under policies and guidance, but they're quite often quite hidden, so have a look at those. If you have got concerns that you don't think are being registered so far with the school, then do talk to your child's teacher or the special needs coordinator. Do take a look at the local offer. This is obviously a way to get into information about the school. If you are struggling and you haven't been able to get the support that you need via the school, then do make contact with us as Hampshire SENDIASS, and we can sort of give you information about, what you might need to do next. We always encourage parents to work with the school. We do know that schools are often, some are resistant to that, but that is not what they should be doing. And then we've got quite a lot of information on our website about other organisations that are out there. And that's it for now. That's our contact details. I'm sure you've got questions. I'm quite happy to try and answer them if I can. That's it. Lovely. Thank you. Right, I'm going to stop sharing now.
I've just got one question at the moment, Tim.
Right.
And it's, how does the local offer work?
How does the local offer work?
Which I know is a biggie.
Well, the local offer is it's a statutory responsibility. So the SEN Code of Practice says that every local authority should provide a local offer. So the local offer is like a one-stop shop page of information, not one page, lots of information that each local authority has a responsibility to provide for parents and carers of children and young people with disabilities and additional needs up to the age of 25. So if you were to look at the local offer, you would be able to, as I said, you'd be able to look in the section on education and childcare, and then you could look at schools. So if you were looking for a different school, if it had come to that and you wanted information about different schools, you might be able to go on the local offer. When the local offer was set up, and hopefully as an ongoing situation, is that schools are expected to provide their own local offer. So it's the offer as to what they provide for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. Thank you, you've put that on, lovely. There is other information on there, so you could look up about short breaks, about gateway cards. Basically it's a sort of one-stop shop, really. We know that the Hampshire local offer isn't as up to date and as clear as it could be. So every local authority may, we live in Hampshire, so we have a lot of other local authorities on our borders. There are times when in my role I've looked at other local offers. They're all very different, but they all basically have the same sort of information on there.
In fact, we can actually access, can't we, sometimes, Tim, of local offers from other areas, because both in terms of schools or
yes.
Respite provision. So it's one of those things where we do, particularly in this part where I'm in Hart and Rushmore. Right. I'm sat here bordering Berkshire and Surrey. So yeah, it is worth looking at the others as well. I'm just going to pop a couple of other local ones in here. It's a funny old term, isn't it, local offer, Tim? Because it ends up meaning the website, and it shouldn't mean the website. It should mean the provision available in the county, and it's not just from Hampshire, it's from everybody. So it should actually include, local third sector provision as well. But it's not, I know it's not always up to date, and it's a tricky one. Right, I hope that answers that question. It's not a easy answer, it's a huge question. Right, what else have we got? Once your child is on the SEN register, does that mean they are allocated extra funding for support such as OT?
If they're on the SEN register, the school is given an amount of money. It's up to about £6,000, I think, per pupil with SEN. But it's money within the school. I would say that if your child has needs that have been identified for occupational therapy, then yes, they should be able to provide that within that budget, really. The schools can make the referrals. Is that what this question is about?
I think it's about, if you are acknowledged as needing that extra help, is a pot of money, does it come with it? At the SEN support level, does a pot of money come with being identified?
It's not new money. It's a difficult one to explain in a way. The budget or the money that is there to support your child is within the school resources, and actually the schools they don't always use the money directly for your child individually, if that makes sense. It's like a collective pot, isn't it?
So there's a budget within schools, thanks Beth, notional SEN budget within schools that could be allocated for the use of any child that was recognised as needing that extra help. But it kind of doesn't come with an ownership, does it? So it's not quite like with an EHCP where you actually get it quantified within SEN support. It's more about meeting need, isn't it, through provision?
And if, to be honest, if it was occupational therapy, so an OT service, the school, if the referral had gone through the school to the occupational therapy team, they are a health team, so you're not actually, unless it's a private OT, then there wouldn't be any exchange of costs, I don't think. Obviously there is a cost, but that's to the health service, and NHS is free at the point of access. So
probably getting too technical.
Sorry.
I know where you're going, but I think schools probably have contracts, and that's probably how they justify the expenditure. But yeah, we're probably getting a bit right. That's all right. Right, let's see what's next. Can you offer any support in choosing a secondary school? My son starts year 7 next year, so I need to apply. Thank you. I'm just in the process of replying to you, Stacey, to say that that's something that gets talked about a huge amount at my get-togethers, and it's something that it may be worth talking to local parents about, because they can give you their experiences. But just remember, your son is unique and everybody else's child is unique, so their experiences will not necessarily mirror yours. However, I'm going to let Tim answer, because there's resources where you can find where you can apply.
Yeah, so Hampshire produced a booklet.
Oh, hang on, Stacey, has your son got an EHCP? Because that makes a difference. Yeah, yes, he has. Right, okay.
Ah, right, okay. So yeah, so Hampshire provide a booklet of schools with that I particularly special schools, and I'm sure we can find the link for that as well. So again, you'd look on the Hampshire website, and there is access to that. So the SEN schools in Hampshire, so they identify by school, by age and by school, the types of support that they offer. So you might be talking specialist schools, are you? I'm not sure if that was the case.
Do you want to give us Stacey, do you want to give us a thumbs up if it's specialist schools, or thumbs down if you're looking?
I don't know.
Not sure. You don't.
Okay,
you're not
okay.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
My choice. I can't choose.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, so there are mainstream schools as well in that are available that have specialisms in certain areas. So it's worth looking on there. You may also want to look at if he's got an EHC plan, you can look at what they call Section 41 schools as well, which is on a government website, where they are schools that have registered with the Secretary of State for Education. And if you were to choose as an option one of those schools, a Section 41 school, then the local authority have to consult with them because they're on that list. There are other schools there that aren't on the Section 41 list, that aren't registered. If you choose one of those, the local authority don't have that commitment to have to consult with them, but they may well do anyway. So it is worth looking around. There's also another booklet which we have, we often send out to parents, which is around, it's another booklet about special schools, which I might be able to find before the end of the meeting.
Certainly, Stacey, it's something that gets talked about a lot. My daughter's year 8, so I've just been through it. It's a huge decision, and you know, the best thing you can do is sort of inform yourself on what the possibilities are, and ultimately what's going to work best for all of you. But definitely worth going along to a get together if you don't already, and having a chat to local parents, because you'll sort of see, you know, where children travel to, young people travel to from your area, and so on, you know, and you might come across schools that you didn't know were out there. And this is where looking across county as well, because so many of us live on borders. Where I live, an awful lot of children travel to schools in both Surrey and Berkshire when it gets to year 7. So that's when looking across those borders and not just at the Hampshire provision can often be useful.
I mean, if you're
Right.
struggling, you can talk to Hampshire SENDIASS. We're not allowed to recommend schools because obviously we're an impartial service, but sometimes we've got knowledge of a range of schools as well, so we can always make some suggestions for places that you might want to look at.
Right. Is it usual to be given an ILP, independent learning plan, without having a formal assessment of needs? I have had a perfunctory contact with only the class teacher, and we have 4 targets that I'm not quite sure about, but I'm very new to this process and don't have enough confidence yet to question. So the question is, what needs to happen before someone is given an independent learning plan?
It sounds to me like your child is on SEN support within school already, so the individual learning plan will be something that hopefully you've put together with the teacher when you've met together. So this is part of what they call the graduated approach, where they've obviously looked at what your child's what level they're at the moment when they're in terms of working alongside their peers. They've identified some areas by the sound of it. Sometimes they're called individual education plans, sometimes they're individual learning plans. Schools call them all sorts of things. I came across something that was called a passport, very much down to the individual school. But basically it is something that they recommend that they are reviewed at least 3 times a year over the year, and that's again a recommendation through a guidance through the SEN Code of Practice. So you should be having those fairly regular. I mean, they may be more often than that, which would be even better. But I'd see it as a good thing. I don't know if that answers the question.
Emma, drop me a note if you want to ask anything further. Oh, let me just see. That might be right. Please can Tim tell us more about what an IEP is or should be, so that next time I get one, I can pay it a bit more attention to its content rather than just sign to acknowledge receipt. Yes, I know that feeling. We've just talked a little bit about an IEP, but can you tell us the purpose of an IEP, Tim, and what we should be seeing on it?
I think what you'd see on an IEP would be it would identify what area. So I don't know if it was something along the lines of behavior or something like that, or being able to sit in a class for a certain period of time. You'd be looking at what is the purpose, so what's the outcome of this intervention. So you want to know what you want it to look like, what good behavior or sitting in a classroom for a period of 10 minutes without getting off their chair and running around, or whatever it is really. That would be the outcome, that would be what you'd wanting to achieve. And then the steps that they're putting in place, who's going to support that, whether that's in a small group or one-to-one or whatever situation. And then there would be a time as well. So it comes probably back to those SMART outcomes. So that's it would be specific, it would be measurable, it would be I've forgotten it now. What's
SMART, measurable, agreed, realistic, and timely.
That's the one. Yeah, thank you. There's always someone to prompt me here.
I think the T sometimes. I think sometimes occasionally they vary, but
yeah, it's timely or time bound.
Ultimately, that you know when a target should be achieved by, so that it just doesn't roll on indefinitely.
Yeah. And they wouldn't on an IEP. You probably wouldn't want to see more than 3 or 4, possibly 5 outcomes that you're working towards. But any school should, if your child's on SEN support, you would expect to be able to have those conversations with the teacher and with the SENCO about what is on that plan.
And that's true. Is that true in any school, Tim, whether it's a primary setting, a secondary setting, or a specialist setting?
Probably more. Well, I mean, specialist settings would have those, they would be working with, if there was a specialist setting, they'd have an education, health and care plan to be in that specialist setting. and that would form part of that annual review. But they would still, hopefully, they would still have interim, parents' evenings or times to get together. But certainly within mainstream schools, you could have an IEP at a nursery, I guess, really, if you've got some identified needs there. But yes, all the way through, really.
And I think, am I right in saying that the concept, calling it an IEP, it's no longer, that's old money, isn't it? It's not really, it doesn't have to be an IEP. It's
That's
just
what I'm saying.
We ought to be assessing something every 3 times a year. I think sometimes my experience of secondary school personally is that they tend to roll this into parents' evenings, which they do 3 times a year. And I don't necessarily tend to get quite the same level of detail that I got at primary school. That's just my personal experience.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see. I'm just looking at the information that the schools get to see. Certainly, one of the things that there should be there is that they really emphasise is that partnership working. So it's working with yourselves and hearing the voice of the young person, the child or young person themselves. It's not just you in the school discussing it. It's hearing their voice as well. Yeah, I'm just looking. Yeah,
I've got a question going back to non-section 41 schools, Tim, and I don't know whether or not you'll know the answer, but I think in a sense the question almost answers itself. How frequently do the local authority help with non-section 41 schools? We are looking at 2. One has 91% EHCPs apparently, and the other 60%.
When they look, when the local authority are looking.
So when do they? What I suspect what the question is how often do they? So although these are presumably private schools and they're non-funded, how often does actually the county paying for those places?
I don't know the answer to that, but I would think that there will be a range of schools that the local authority do look at. They would initially look at, you can sort of almost do a pecking order, couldn't you, of those that are the maintained special schools within Hampshire, and then independent special schools which are on that section 41 list, and then those other schools. I think there are such a shortage of special school places within, well, I think across the country really, not just in Hampshire, that they will look at anything that they feel is appropriate for your child, and they do ask for you to make suggestions for schools as well, if they are looking for a specific,
exhausted all possibilities themselves.
Definitely, yes, they do have a team who are there to identify schools and consult with them. So yeah,
certainly. I mean, near to me here we have Hawleyhurst, which I know is almost exclusively filled with children who have EHCP placed by Hampshire. So it does happen. If it's the only school available, then it does happen. So kind of carrying on the IEP conversation, and this is more a comment than a question. There is a responsibility on the teacher to provide a differentiated lesson. You may, as a parent, you as a parent might need to ensure this happens. Teacher standards is the minimum expectation of a class teacher. Number 5 is about providing an accessible curriculum. Beth, if you've got a link, pop it in there if you get a sec. So basically, all children should have access to the curriculum is the point, isn't it, Tim? And those lessons should be differentiated to ensure that all children should have access to the curriculum. And that's, I suppose, it is, of course, still relevant in specialist settings, but in mainstream settings, the differentiation across a single class is potentially going to be wider. And I think that's when it sometimes breaks down, because, it's more challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think from my experience of conversations with parents over the phone is that it's probably, I wouldn't say it's easier, but in a primary setting, but you know, when you get into secondary setting, you know, you've got a whole range of different teachers, different classes, and I'm not making excuses for them at all, but often parents don't even know if their child's on the SEN register in a secondary school, because there's so many children really. But again, it's, you know, definitely worth having those conversations with the school.
Just a comment from a parent there saying we've finally managed to get homework appropriate to the level they say my son is working at. And indeed, yeah, homework being differentiated is another whole kettle of fish. And some of those things, I think, become more challenging, as Tim says, the further you get through the education system. I think the other thing, Tim, in my experience about secondary versus primary, is that at primary, teachers are often able to differentiate to a lower level because they've worked at that level. The challenge I personally find in secondary is that the teachers haven't taught at primary level, and they might need to differentiate to primary level to support my daughter, so they don't have the experience in how to do it.
No.
Right. Okay, at the minute, that's all our questions. I've just got a couple of links I'm going to sort out here. I've posted quite a lot of links. If you are on a laptop, I'm not sure how this works if you're on a phone or an iPad. Within the chat box, just to the top right, there's next to the smiley face, there's 3 little dots. And next, if you click those 3 little dots, it enables you to save the chat, and therefore all of the links and bits and pieces direct to your computer. They also appear, if you go back to when we've recorded this, what we do is we post it up on our YouTube channels. What you'll find is all the links also appear there as well alongside the recording. Right, thank you, Vicky, for telling me the link to that sample EHCP. IEP even isn't working. It's working on my computer. Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to try. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to try and post it as a picture rather than let me see if I can get this to work. Chat amongst yourselves for a moment. Let's see if I can get this to work. Tim, in terms of a child being on SEN support, if they've got an EHCP, that's just, you know, you review that every year, and, you know, the local authority has to say whether or not they're continuing it. How does it work in terms of being on SEN support? Does there become a conversation at some time about whether or not that should be continued?
I suppose that comes down to whether there are any ongoing targets, you know, to reach really. I would have thought that if SEN support had been identified and a piece of work had been put in and everything was, you know, the child had reached the level of the other children, then that would end. But the likelihood, as we probably know with many of our children, is that there's always going to be something else. You know, you would hope that they wouldn't start their life in school with the same, or end, should I say, you know, with the same targets as they started with. It should be a sort of process where the next level is identified and the next things are put in place. So I would imagine that they would continue to carry on the SEN register. I suppose the other thing to mention is that when they move up to secondary school, you know, does that information go with them? What information, you know?
Yeah, that's going to be my next question.
You know, that those transitions between schools, you know, again, it's another conversation I've had many times.
And the 16+ one seems to be the one which I see where things break down more.
Well, colleges are supposed to have
Frozen, or is it me? Oh, there we go, you're back.
Yeah.
But it's that sort of 16+ transition that seems to be a bit more rocky.
Yeah, I mean, colleges are supposed to put SEN support in place, but it often looks very different in a college, and colleges will look to having an education, health and care plan often before they'll put extra support in place.
There's a question here, Tim, about what should be involved in an EHCP as a need and therefore provision met. So a parent asking that their child's needs are more sensory based and connected with emotional and mental health. should the services to meet these needs be provided through the NHS privately, or is it something that can be written into an EHCP?
Good question. So as long as the if they're health needs that have an effect on their education, basically, then it would be written into the plan. There is an area of the EHC plan where health needs can be identified, and support for that and provision for that put in place. Anything that is linked to your child's SEN, so your child's special or your person's special educational needs, so a health need where it affects their ability to learn will be in the will come under the physical sensory section, or social emotional mental health, depending on what they are. Oh, well, it could be under communication interaction if it was language,
if that sensory challenge or affects things, and if it affects their ability to access the curriculum, then it can go on an EHCP.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's really important that it's there as well. Looking at EHC plans, it's making sure that the information is there, is accurate, up to date, robust, is going to make a difference to that child.
Talking about the information, useful comment here, that when we're looking at transitions, and that could be from school to school or from year to year group, it's the official documentation usually does make its way from setting to setting or class to class, but it's the useful intervention day-to-day stuff that doesn't, like where to sit in the class, coloured paper, etc. Making a portfolio, sometimes called a passport, for your child of what works can help. Absolutely, definitely. I know for some schools, the teachers sort of almost have all of that behind the screen for each child. Even so, you've got 30 kids in a class potentially. You want to make sure that your bit stands out, don't you?
Yeah. It's really important that information is passed on, and it's almost worth checking up on it as well, rather than it being leaving it to the school, because again, they've got so many children moving on to other schools, that we know it's important information, but so often that information is not passed on. You need to make contact with the SENCO if you're going to visit schools, prior to the either choosing them or when they've been offered a place, is linking up with the SENCO straight away at those meetings, so that you have that conversation. They're aware that your child is coming. What information do they need from the previous school?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes it's, what should happen and what does isn't necessarily the same. And you're never at fault for sort of getting yourself on the front foot and,
absolutely,
organising those visits or whatever it is. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think we've covered off all the bits that people have raised. If anybody else has anything else, please do ask now.
And we have got loads of information on our website, so the hampshiresendiass.co.uk website.
That on there.
You just have to go into there. There's lots of information about SEN support, about how to get an EHC plan, everything that you might want to know. And do contact us, do call us up, and we can talk you through the processes. We can give you direction as to what you need to do.
We've also been doing these sessions for a while now, haven't we, Tim? And
yes,
there is on both the Hampshire SENDIASS YouTube channel and the HPCN YouTube channel, there's lots of these sessions on different things: how to apply for EHCPs, the appeals process, what should actually happen, what is an annual review, what is the annual review process, what should happen at the annual review. So there's all sorts of things on there that are worth having a look at.
I think we've touched on like transition today, haven't we? We I did a discussion on transition, and so there's lots.
So a couple of things that have popped up. So if information isn't on the formal plan, does schools share that info? I would say it's hit and miss, but they should. Doesn't mean they will. and EHCPs, when to expect school to apply for one?
Well, how long is a piece of string? You know, so if you've had a conversation, if SEN support is not sufficient and the school have said that they're unable to provide any further support without an education, health and care plan needs assessment being done, then it may be that the school will suggest that they make a request. But again, quite often schools will try and put you off for some reason. They say no, or it'll take ages to get one, or you know, you're fobbed off with lots of various excuses really. But you are able to request a plan yourself, so you don't have to wait for the school to do it. We always advise that you work with the school as much as possible. However, you know, you can make a request yourself. But again, it's a lot of it is down to the evidence that you provide. To make sure that the information is all there.
Yeah, I would say if a school are dragging their feet, get on it yourself. And the way it works, Tim, correct me if I get this wrong. So if you apply for one yourself, the school will still be asked, won't they, to put information in as part of the assessment. You've muted yourself, Tim. There you go.
No, I muted it because my son's appeared in the vicinity.
Hi, son.
I didn't know what state of dress he was going to be in.
Muting won't make a difference, Tim. You need to
No,
take the camera off for that.
I'm not. Anyway, yes. So what were you asking? Sorry, about the information.
If a parent was to request an EHCP themselves as part of the assessment process, the school would be asked to provide information.
They definitely would be asked to provide the information anyway. Yes, so they're not going to get out of doing it. Again, often had the conversation with a parent who said the school said, "Oh, we've got so many other children in line before yours, but your child is individual and therefore, you know, important." If you make a request for an education, health and care plan, the school are going to be contacted and they will still have to provide their information. They're just going to have to get on with it, aren't they, really?
Sorry, I'm talking and I'm muted. I've just popped the SENDIASS channel on YouTube on. And I'm just going to try and do the one of, but so that's I'm trying to stop the videos playing so you can hear the videos as I find it. Okay. Hopefully, oh, hang on, here we go. Can you see what the school writes before they send it? So that, I suspect, Tim, is connected with the information a school is being asked to apply for an EHCP. So do you get oversight of what the school has written before they send it to Hampshire?
More than likely not always the case unless you've asked the school to share it with you. The information that they submit, they will submit on the SEN hub, which you will have access to. So any new requests, well, the requests that have been made in the last couple of years have been, when you make your request, you then are given a log on for the or a registration for the SEN hub, which is an online hub which allows you to, as soon as any other professional puts their report on there, then you have access to it, and they inform you along the way. So it provides you with an up-to-date look at where the process is, where the assessment is, whether they've agreed to assess in the first place. You can upload documents on there. So if your child has a diagnosis of something and you want to put that in, then you can upload it onto the hub, and everyone else will be able to see that. Your comments are gathered on the hub. You complete that.
But what you don't have is a right of veto, is it? So you know, if school isn't showing you what they're writing for approval necessarily, they might, but they don't have to.
I haven't come across that very often, I don't think, really, but that might not be the case. If you're working really closely with the school, then hopefully they will be, you know, transparent about their information. But there are lots of cases where schools have put very little information on the hub when they've been asked for information, and then that obviously may have an effect on whether the assessment is agreed in the first place.
I have had one in my area recently where I know something went through without any information from the setting.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to repeat, if anybody would like to save, because there's lots and lots of links today on the chat, but if you would like to save those, you can use the 2 little dots next to the chat box, or they will also appear on the recording, I believe. If nobody else has any questions to ask, I will stop the recording.